Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's press briefing on our marine parks. I'm Donna Bush. As always, welcome to the viewing and listening public. We welcome our panelists, Premier the Honourable Alden McLaughlin, Minister for Environment the Honourable Dwayne Seymour, Director of the DOE, Mrs. Gina Ebanks Petrie, and Acting Port Director, Mr. Joseph Woods. Thank you all for being here with us, of course. With us in studio are members of the media and other invited guests. We begin today with the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. I am pleased to speak today regarding the recently gazetted regulations enhancing our marine protected areas. There is no doubt that a thriving and healthy marine environment is important to the people of the Cayman Islands, both socially and economically. Our people want proactive conservation through active management of our natural resources. Feedback received during a public consultation exercise indicated that the majority of people see the need for enhancement of the marine parks. Scientific evidence suggests that to secure a healthy, productive, and resilient marine environment, at least 30% of the world's ocean must be safeguarded in a network of well-managed marine protected areas. Here in Cayman, we have exceeded this target and have protected over 45% of our shallow coastal shelf. By doing this, we have created a resilient system of marine protected areas that will achieve a strong and sustainable balance between traditional fishing and recreational uses and the conservation benefit that is necessary to support those uses. As a recap, the marine parks came into force following a period of public consultation in 1986. First on Grand Cayman, with Cayman Brac and Little Cayman following shortly after. In 2011, for the 25th anniversary of the marine parks, we obtained UK Darwin funding for a comprehensive scientific review of the marine parks, as well as a public consultation on people's views of their marine environment at the time and what they wanted for the future. Out of that local knowledge and consultation, our local research and international best practices, was the recommendation that the Cayman Islands enhance our system of marine parks to build on our success to that point and better prepare us for the future. Several rounds of public consultation and ongoing local research occurred over the next few years, ending with the production of a plan in 2016 for the enhanced marine park system. This was considered, including reviewing the public consultation feedback by the National Conservation Council and endorsed by the Cabinet, and was endorsed and sent to the Cabinet for consideration. The Cabinet reviewed the proposals and the public feedback, and with some minor amendments, such as the shoreline fishing zones, approved the plan to go to legal drafting for the creation of the regulations to bring the enhanced marine parks into force. I should add that was more than 2 years ago. Drafting the regulations took several rounds of consultations between the legal drafts person and the Department of Environment over the course of those years. This was to make sure that the rules agreed in plain English by the Cabinet could be translated effectively into law without inadvertently introducing loopholes or unintended restrictions. The final draft regulations were then sent to Cabinet and have now received Cabinet's approval. Some of the changes which are seen in these enhanced regulations are in the marine reserves, environmental zone, line fishing zones, the no diving overlay zone, to name a few. The technical team from the Department of Environment and the Port Authority are here to expand further in this regard. I want to impress upon everyone how important it is that we continue to enhance our marine protected areas, safeguarding these for generations to come. I thank the efforts which have gone into ensuring that these enhancements become a reality.
Thank you very much, Premier McLaughlin. We now go to the Minister for Environment, the Honourable Dwayne Seymour.
Thank you, Donna. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us as we make these important announcements to update the public on enhanced marine parks regulations This project has been a long time coming, with years of labor, research, and debate to reach the best possible outcomes. People around the world who depend on the ocean for their livelihood have had a front row seat to dire and unprecedented change, and we in Cayman have not been spared in this regard. While we know that many areas have suffered and been degraded, our previous marine parks, which was established 35 years ago, served us in good stead, but ensuring that we have been able to mitigate the effects of some of the threats to our marine environment. Globally, the expansion of marine protected areas is now being actively promoted as a way to halt or even reverse the evident decline in marine resources, with international targets being set at 30% of national waters protected in no-take zones by 2030. It might be shocking to know that only 4.8% of the global oceans are protected, and only 2% of that is designated as fully protected areas. We as Caymanians want to drive up this figure and ensure that our waters remain one of our greatest calling cards. This is why this government has approved the protection of 45.2% of coastal shelf in no-take marine parks. According to studies by various scientific bodies, the economic benefits are worth the exercise as well. For example, according to one study published in the Science Direct, the results showed that global benefits of expanding marine parks exceed their costs by a factor between 1.4 to 2.7, depending on the location and extent of the expansion. Targeting protection towards the pristine areas with high biodiversity yields higher net returns than focusing on areas with low biodiversity or areas that have experienced high human impact. In the Cayman Islands, we put our first marine parks into place in 1986 and have been reaping the dividends ever since. With all this in mind, I want to highlight for you the national goals we have been able to achieve. Number one, increasing no-take protection based on the local recognition of our need for enhanced marine protection and international best practice recommendations. Change from 14% to 45.2%. Improving spillover fisheries, distribution of effectively sized no-take marine reserves around all three islands, including some with no diving overlays, to promote a healthy marine environment and spillover fish from protected areas to open or line fishing areas. Protecting healthy and productive habits and ecosystem connectivity. To maintain and upgrade many areas, for example, the marine parks or replenishment zones to marine reserves, while extending protection of marine life from shore to reef wall 150 feet depth in most areas to provide a continuum of protected marine habitats, including seagrass and fringing reef, as well as wall and mangrove habitats. Maintaining and upgrading already protected areas such as practicable should make use easier by the public. Standardization. Zones go from shore to drop off in most cases, with basic rules, for example, anchoring the same throughout. This, along with the strong emphasis on straightforward no-take marine reserves, makes the zones safer, makes the zones easier for the public to use, and more efficient for policing. In conclusion, having consulted widely with the public and based on the scientific and technical information available, we believe the enhancements to the current marine parks are balanced and effective, and that they will serve us well as we face the growing number of threats to our marine environment. I want to thank my teams at the Ministry of the Environment and the Department of Environment for their tremendous work in moving the country forward with these updated regulations. I also wish to acknowledge and thank the legislative drafting team for their work in helping us to make this possible. It has been an honor to be a part of this project and truly a touching reminder that our motto, "We have founded it upon the seas," is ever so pertinent. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you very much, Minister Seymour. We now go to the Director of the DOE, Mrs. Gina Ebanks Petrie.
Thank you, Donna. The Department of Environment is extremely pleased that several years of research, as well as consultation with the public and various stakeholders, have resulted in the formal adoption of our proposals to enhance our existing system of marine parks. We would like to thank the Premier for his leadership, the Minister for shepherding the new regulations through caucus and Cabinet, and the Cabinet for passing them. Throughout the course of the multi-year review of our existing marine parks, several things became clear. First, our research showed that while the implementation of our existing marine parks some 35 years ago this April was effective in protecting the marine environment and coasts of the Cayman Islands, the parks required enhancement to halt or even reverse evident declines in our marine resources as a result of the growing number of local and global threats to our marine environment. During the course of our work, we also discovered that local fishing pressure is higher than previously believed, and it was evident that climate change, national population growth, development trajectories, and economic growth will continue to apply pressures on our marine environment. All of this pointed to the need for urgent action to arrest the declines in reef health and fish biodiversity, abundance, and size before they reach a point where they can no longer be corrected. The pandemic has highlighted food security as an important socioeconomic concern for our islands. Ensuring that our fisheries resources continue to be available for local consumption requires them to be sustainably managed through enhanced marine parks and other management tools such as closed seasons, catch limits, and size limits. A large body of international research has now shown the effectiveness of no-take marine parks as a fisheries management tool. With overall significantly higher levels of density, biomass, species diversity, and size of organisms within reserves compared to outside. So, given that they have a variety of biological, fishing, economic, and management benefits, the Department of Environment believes that the enhanced system of marine parks, which have now been enacted, combined with specific fisheries management as needed, is the optimal management tool to ensure the Cayman Islands marine resources are better able to resist or recover from existing and emerging threats. It is probably worth noting that for the first 6 months, the DOE will be concentrating on public education and awareness around the changes that have been introduced by the new regulations. Our team at the DOE have already produced new marine park brochures for distribution to the public. The brochure, which contains maps of the new parks of the three islands, as well as a summary of the rules that apply in each of the areas, will be on our website, and we'll ensure that it is on the front page for easy accessibility. Over the coming weeks, we will utilize our social media sites to ensure that the new rules are communicated as widely as possible. We will also develop a new version of the Siren app to allow all smartphone users to have access to the up-to-date maps of the parks and the rules that apply in each area. And we hope to be in a position to roll this out within the next 6 weeks or thereabouts. In the meantime, we will take down the existing Siren app to minimize any opportunity for confusion. Of course, we will also be busy moving boundary markers in the sea and range markers on land to assist people with locating where they are in relation to the new park boundaries. And we will install new information signs at key locations such as launching ramps and public docks. We have provided a series of facts on the park for the press, which will cover the specific changes as a result of the new regulations. At this point, we'd just be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Ebanks-Petrie. We now go to the Acting Director of the Port, Mr. Joseph Woods.
Thank you, Donna. Good afternoon, everyone. Our involvement is very small in that we only have the area that is surrounding the port to deal with. But of course, the port anchorage area, which is defined in the law, it was also impacted by the marine parks legislation. So during the revision of it, we had the opportunity of addressing some of the issues that we had. And it's just basically a twofold. One was control of the anchorage area, and the second one was to remove the fear of vessels anchoring and damaging coral and being fined a large fine for it. So we worked closely with DOE, and we came to a practical solution to it. The areas that we did not need for anchoring, we gladly gave those up to remain as a marine park. And the areas that we did use for anchoring vessels, DOE gladly removed the marine parks from it so that vessels could anchor without the fear of being penalized if the wind shifted and their vessel dragged an anchor, or, for some other reason it damaged any of the coral. The areas that we did give up, though, were the areas where the majority of the coral lay. So there was far more coral in those areas that we gave up so that they could be protected and preserved for the future generations of Cayman. And we kept mainly the white sand bottoms that vessels could safely anchor in. So with that, we came to an agreement, and we're still working together. We will mark those so that the public will know when they're outside of a marine park. And on the safety aspect that I touched on, what it means is that for people who are diving or swimming in the marine park area, they will have boundaries that are set that they'll know when they're leaving a marine park area and entering into the anchorage area. And we want to prevent people from being injured or killed if they actually venture into the anchorage area where vessels are moving, where there's vessel traffic. And likewise, if they wanted to dive in the designated port anchorage area, they could always call Port Security on VHF 16 and obtain that permission, once it's safe to do. But this new revision allows us to separate those and to be able to control the port anchorage area better.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Woods. We're now, and to the rest of our panelists, we're now going to go to the media, starting with Wendy from CNS.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I was hoping that there was a map around, actually. My first question is the port area that's been excluded now from the marine park enhancement. It does seem to go way beyond the anchorage, and it seems to encompass the whole, like a big chunk of Georgetown Harbour. So I just wondered if you can explain why there's such an enormous part of the port, the enormous part of the harbour that's been taken up as a port anchorage. So
You want me to take it? Yeah, turn it.
Okay, I'll respond to that, and then Gina can supplement it. The anchorage area is, in fact, smaller now than the original it was. If you go back into the port regulations, you'll see the definition that it ran from just beyond Eden Rock all the way down to nearly Treasure Island Resort, from the shore to past the drop-off. The new revision has Eden Rock protected, and it also has along the shoreline from north of Royal Water Terminal all the way down to where it ended at near Treasure Island Resort.
Just turn it on.
So the boundaries hasn't changed except for those areas that we have given up. So we now have a smaller anchorage area, not any bigger.
Just a little
But what we have is a practical anchorage area that is more into the white sand bottom.
Okay, I was hoping that we could actually have you see the map, Wendy. It does
yeah,
help.
I can see it now.
Okay, can you see it now?
See it from the computer.
It still seems to encompass some of the areas that were designated blue spots, so that's why I'm still raising why those areas are not now protected, and they were in the original draft.
Okay, so I think it's also pretty important to recognize that the species protections that are in the Marine Reserve regulations have been mirrored in the Port Authority regulations. So there will still be no fishing allowed and no taking of marine life within the designated port anchorage area. So from the perspective of the species protections, we actually haven't lost anything. They remain. They're just in the port regulations now, as opposed to in the Marine Reserve regulations.
I think it might also be helpful if the director would explain the reason why, from an international as well as local perspective, it is critical that the anchorage area is expressly within the jurisdiction of the Port Authority.
Yeah. Well, we had to address international obligations. One of those is the ISPS code, which deals with the safety of port facilities and vessels. And in addition to that, like I mentioned before, if you're a captain of a vessel and you come to anchor and you have what's a marine park, you then ask yourself, am I going to anchor in a marine park, or is this a safe anchorage area? So that's what we tried to resolve, whereby there was no ambiguity whatsoever. And we offer the same protections, except that you can anchor without having that fear and worry anymore. On the ISPS side, it enables us to control the port. We have full control of the port and the waters around it.
What other changes besides the fishing zones were altered from the original draft and marine suggested enhancement from the first consultation that was ready at the end of the last administration to what actually ended up going to Cabinet to be approved? What major changes happened in that period of time?
There really weren't any major changes. The proposals that were put forward, that the DOE put forward to the National Conservation Council following the public consultation that we undertook, were essentially the proposals that went to Cabinet. And as we've outlined, a few fishing areas, I think, were modified, and then the carve out for the port. Those were the two main changes that occurred.
Also, what's the situation now regarding the use of spear guns?
So there are also new spear gun directives that have been gazetted. The Department of Environment now needs to work with the National Conservation Council to work out some of the details of how they will actually be implemented. But essentially, they give life to the amendments that were made in the actual National Conservation Law in 2013. With, as you all remember, there were some amendments made on the floor of the House during committee stage. So we had to address those amendments and ensure that the spear gun licensing directives were consistent with those amendments. That's now been done, but there's some process issues that we need to figure out with the National Conservation Council. And once we do that, we will obviously be briefing the press again on that so that the public can be aware of what the new rules are in relation to spear gun licensing, etc.
Is there still a hope that we can stop spearfishing altogether at some point?
These directives do not contemplate that. What they do contemplate is capping spearfishing at existing levels. So they don't contemplate a growth in the level of spearfishing.
Okay, thank you. Actually, this next question is for the Minister with regards to financing right now for the DOE to be able to address the stony coral tissue loss, because obviously we're enhancing our protections, and then we've got this disease that no amount of barriers or whatever is going to stop. So obviously they need a lot more money, and they kind of need it now. And I know it's election season, but you're still holding the purse strings. Is there any way you can help them with money so they can do stuff this week?
Did they tell you the numbers?
Minister,
that they
I
need?
could maybe help you here. we actually
you seem
got
to have a lot of
permission.
information on this.
Yeah, we actually got permission from the ministry to reappropriate some funding that the DOE was approved in the last budget under from the Environmental Protection Fund for other projects towards the stony coral tissue loss disease project. So we received that permission at the end of January, and we're currently working to try to get additional resources to assist the DOE with the use of that Environmental Protection Fund
Gina,
money.
let's further elaborate on what kind of costs we're looking at.
Well, at the moment, we've got just under $100,000 that we can apply to additional resources. And that's human resources as well as any kind of equipment. We need antibiotics, for example, for the treatment. But we feel that money, we've produced a budget, and we feel that money can take us through to the end of the year, and that we will then be obviously formulating new proposals to go forward in the next budget following the election, I would assume. So that's our plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so if there's any emergency, the minister's supporting any changes to your reallocation and any emergency money that you might need.
Yeah, they've definitely approved us reallocating money that we've had for other projects to go towards the stony coral tissue loss disease. So we feel that with that reappropriation of funds, we can get ourselves through till the end of the year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Wendy, thank you very much. We're going to now call on Andrell Harris. I do have one question from the public before Andrell asks his question. The question is giving kudos to everyone that's been involved in getting these changes made. The person wants to address the reality of human resources. Will there be an increase in the number of people who are monitoring our seas as far as the marine parks and the new changes?
Well, if I may say, and the director will probably speak to this further, but we gave some additional support over the last 4 years in terms of support and monitoring this, monitoring the environment. But as the director said earlier, there's a budget. There's a budget to be had after the election. A new 4-year budget, and most definitely it would be up to the director to advise the ministry as to what support they'll need moving forward, and most likely something of this nature. We're taking it from 14% up to 45%. So most definitely you need more support.
I would just like to say that the Department of Environment currently has the responsibility to monitor our marine environment around the entire coastline of the 3 islands. So changing the boundaries of the marine protected areas isn't significantly going to impact the effort that we already expend in that regard. So, we are looking very carefully. We obviously understand that we have a responsibility, as does all of government, to try to keep our expenditure under control. So we look very carefully at whether we need additional human resources and other types of resources before we make proposals to government to increase our budget. And that's an ongoing process for us. But like I said, we don't anticipate, an enormous increase in our ask for resources, simply because we already have that responsibility, and we've been working in the waters around the 3 islands, all of the waters, not just our marine protected areas.
I should also add that with the advent of the Coast Guard, once we get the Coast Guard really up to full force, I can see great possibilities for synergies between these 2 departments in keeping our waters safe and enforcing the range of legislation that is there, not just what would be traditional police work as far as the Coast Guard is concerned.
Thank you very much.
Definitely.
Mr. Harris?
Thank you. My first question is simply, when do the expansions take effect?
Well, the new regulations are in effect now, but as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, the Department of Environment understands that there will be a period of time where the local population will need to familiarize themselves with the new areas and the new rules. So in the first 6 months from here on in, we're going to be really focusing on increasing public awareness and public education on the new rules, where they are, what the areas mean. As much as people need to know, we will try to provide that information.
So in essence, there will be a 6-month grace period then?
I think we need to be careful about saying a grace period, because some of the areas have not changed significantly. So, if you know that, for example, in South Sound, it's a replenishment zone now, and if you were to be caught taking lobster inside the reef there, it's an offense now. It will be an offense in the future. So it's unlikely that we would sort of, take somebody who clearly knows the rules and not enforce the law against that person. What we're going to be lenient about is where there are changes to the areas and changes to the rules that people could legitimately claim not to know. We're obviously not going to be pressing cases forward in that instance, but we don't want to give the impression that there's a free-for-all out there, because that's absolutely not the situation.
Yeah, and did you mention the app?
Yes, I did mention that I think most people are aware that there is an existing app called Siren that allows you, if you have a smartphone, to know where you are in relation to the marine protected areas, and then what the rules are in the area that you happen to be in. So we're going to be taking the old app down, and we're developing a new app that will have the new protected areas and the new rules. But it will have the same, or hopefully better functionality that will allow everyone who has a smartphone, which is probably everyone by now, to be able to see where they are and to know what the rules are.
Okay. In light of the expansions or proposed expansions, has there been any amendments to the fines and/or penalties?
No, there have not. Those penalties and fines are actually included in the primary legislation in the law.
Okay. If I might, there are two other smaller questions that are of topical interest and not necessarily related to this, but we'd like an update on the mangrove situation, whether or not a notice has been served, and whether or not any actions have been taken where that is concerned, and what is your message, if any, to those who continue to flaunt the law?
So I think that people are aware by now that there was some clearing of vegetation in the Red Bay area, Abbey Way, in the location of Abbey Way Road. So the Department of Environment is continuing to investigate that. We did issue a cease and desist order to the heavy equipment operators so that they would stop the clearance, because once we determined that the applicant didn't have any, or the owner of the property didn't have permission from planning to clear the land by mechanical means, that requires planning permission, that then makes it an offense to clear mangrove vegetation under the National Conservation Law. So the two laws work together. If somebody has permission to clear their property, then there is no offense involved in the clearing of mangrove vegetation. But because we were able to verify with planning, and they've confirmed that they've also issued, I think, an enforcement notice on the landowner. So we are continuing our investigations, as are they. And I'm just not able to say the outcome of those because we haven't concluded our investigation for sure.
I just want to mention, thank you, Gina, that since my discussion with the director about some of the similar cases, we've discussed trying to make another effort, trying to get information out there to ensure that everyone has it. We all know when these consultation processes come up, not everyone attends, not everyone gets their information the same way. We need to come up with ways to try to get it to as much people as possible, the information in regards to mangroves and clearing and everything else. But we've had a discussion on that, and we'll have further discussions on this in terms of communicating.
Andrea, thanks for asking the question, because it puts in context the comments which are attributed to me, which I made about the situation there. That's my constituency. There are 3 lots. They are in a residential subdivision with a house here, a house here, a house here, a house the other side. So they're not. These are not mangroves that are in, like bordering on the shoreline or anything. This is in the middle, not in the middle, towards the end of the Selkirk Estates subdivision. So when I was asked what, I thought someone was asking me for advice. I didn't know I was being interviewed, but I would have said the same thing anyhow. Is that they asked about if the individual had or the company had planning permission. I said I believe so. I can't think that they're going to go and openly clear with big machine 3 lots in a subdivision. This has been going on for weeks without planning permission. So I suggested to the reporter that she check to ensure that it's the case. But the points that I made was that if property is zoned residential and you have planning permission, or you apply for planning permission, unless there are very, very compelling reasons, you are bound to get the planning permission, even if it involves the clearing of mangrove, because the legislation and government simply cannot sterilize a person's investment by saying, we are now going forward going to say that you can never clear any mangrove in a residential community. Some form of compensation would have to be found to pay the landowner for that. So it was in that context that I made the comment to suggest, unfortunately, as some have, that I was somehow condoning the illegal clearing of land. I was proceeding on the premise that everyone else in the neighborhood was proceeding on, which was that they must have gotten planning permission, and everybody cussing planning, when in fact no application for planning permission was ever made. You cannot lawfully clear any land in Cayman now by mechanical means unless you have planning permission. And the main reason for that is to ensure that what has happened for many, many years doesn't continue to happen, where developers go in and plow up huge areas of land speculatively, so that the public can see what the land looks like, I presume, and therefore they're better able to market it. And sometimes, as we have seen in the past happen along the 7 Mile Beach, the land stays there for years and years and years and years with nothing happen. But the mangrove and whatever other forest that was there has all disappeared. And the other historical point I made, which was seized upon, is that I have lived here for almost 60 years. When I was a boy, the entire Red Bay and Prospect area were all or mostly mangrove, forest, and swamp. So that almost every house that stands in those 2 communities, Prospect and Red Bay, are built on reclaimed land from which mangrove and all other vegetation was cleared. So I am not suggesting that justifies people destroying the mangrove, by no means at all. I'm just saying there needs to be some perspective about the clearing of lots within an already established residential area, which has houses standing all around it. But you've got to get planning permission. before you do. You can't just run off and do what this developer has apparently done. And I am hopeful that some lessons can be learned and some messages sent to people generally about this as a result of this situation.
Thank you. Final question really is just going back to the reason why we're here today. So it's been stated that we're increasing the marine park zones from 14% to 45.2%. Is this increase proportionate to the threat that you, Director Ebanks Petrie, say we are under? Is this really a proportionate increase?
Yes, so what we've done is we've increased the amount of no-take area from about 14% to just over 45% on average across the three islands. And we believe that the increase was absolutely necessary to address the evident decline that we were seeing in fish life and species diversity, abundance, everything that we took 3 years to assess the current marine parks and to try to figure out, what was working and what wasn't. And it was very clear from the work that we were doing that marine protected areas offered benefits like increasing biodiversity, like increasing biomass and abundance. So it was very quite easy to figure out what we needed to do. We believe that the increase is definitely proportionate to the threat.
Just want to add to that, as I mentioned earlier, international targets are set for 30% by 2030. We've gone to 45.2.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions from anyone in the room, do you have any further comments from our panelists? No? Okay.
No, all I'd say is that the government is really happy that we've gotten this over the line before we demit office. It hasn't been for lack of trying. As I said, Cabinet approved the drafting instructions for these regulations more than 2 years ago. So that sometimes the processes just take a very long time. The only other thing I'd say is that we hope to have another really exciting announcement, not next week, but probably the following week, related again to the environment and our efforts to continue to protect and to promote our environment. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the public and, of course, to the media for joining us for today's briefing. Of course, thank you to our panelists for sharing this important news with us today. Remember, you can go online to doe.ky for more information. Until next time, I wish everyone out there a wonderful weekend.